So we're going to start recording the non-live version now. And this is going to be the version that's actually going to go on YouTube later.
Okay.
Now, simultaneously, I'm going to start my cell phone for starting a live video. So this is going to be a live video that is currently being started, and we are just going to hook this up here. All right. So that looks better. That looks better, right? All right, excellent. And that is just perfect timing with the music fading out there. So, turns out everybody can actually hear us right now. We are currently live, as far as I'm aware of it. Now, people can contact us on the phone here, and it looks like you can see how many people are joining as it's happening. This is since I've clicked the live button, people are tuning in here. So that's how this is happening right now. That's how this is going to be going out into the world. So first off, let me just introduce my guest. This is David Carpenter, the second official guest on the Info Assault, the radio show and live performance that you're currently listening to, hosted by Jess FM, and we are broadcasting live out of Lethbridge, Alberta. Now, you may notice that my name is Thomas James Arelis Carpenter, and his name is David Carpenter. There is a familiar resemblance. He would be my favorite father, just as I am his favorite son, right?
You're certainly
favorite
one
child,
of them.
totally. I mean, so there's absolutely indisputable. Now, if you did want to find us online at a later point or whatever, you could. There is a couple of Facebook groups. There's a self-titled page called the Thomas James Arelis Carpenter, actually, self-titled. There is the Info Assault. There is the largest group, where there's probably a couple people listening from right now, called I Hate Donald Trump. And yeah, we'll just name a few, but we'll be starting our interview. So, David Carpenter, born and raised in Lethbridge, Alberta. Now, to several of our listeners who are from Lethbridge, it'll come as no surprise that David was the democratically elected mayor of our city for several years, 16 if I'm remembering correctly, consecutive actually. Both prior and since, he's kept quite occupied with many different positions, jobs, titles, denominations, responsibilities, delegations, descriptions, characteristics, all of which are very, very interesting. But let's start things off. Would you like to say something to the people online?
Sure, Tom. Firstly,
that'd be great.
The elected office thing, you're off by a little bit. I served in 8 consecutive elections, 3 elections for council for the city of Lethbridge, and 5 elections as mayor. So that's starting in 1977, ending in 2001. So 24 years in total.
24 years. That's a lot of years. So, did that take like a lot of Russians, or just 1 or 2 meetings? And did you adopt any babies, or like how did that go?
Well, of course, Russians have always been involved.
Oh, obviously. This is pretty much standard practice for years now, right?
Well, in the old days, Tom, actually, we actually got more involved in their politics than they did in ours.
That's smart. You know, I can see. So what did you used to do?
Well, I can remember back in 1980-81, I was on council, and Lethbridge City Council was watching as the USSR invaded Poland. We had a very strong Polish community in Lethbridge, and they asked us to take some action, which we did after a fair amount of debate. We actually passed a resolution which not only was sent to the USSR ambassador in Ottawa, but also directly to the Kremlin. And it wasn't several months later that not only did the USSR pull out of Poland, that they actually started the process to disband the USSR. So resolution from Lethbridge City Council has a lot of weight.
That's a pretty deep topic to jump into right off the bat there. I mean, geesh, that's some heavy stuff.
Well, there was others that were even more significant from us. I remember once at the behest of citizens, and this was just after the 3 Mile Island problem in the U.S., we passed a resolution actually to ban all nuclear devices from the city of Lethbridge.
That's good.
And since then, and I'm almost certain this is true, we have not seen one single nuclear submarine in Henderson Lake.
You know, I bet it would be pretty difficult to sneak one in there. It's you know, it's not super stealthy as far as.
Well, we've noticed them coming and going, but you know they are underwater.
It's true. It's true. I mean, tunnels. Who knows? Who knows? Now you mentioned a 3 Mile something. What was that? What was that you were talking about
Well,
there?
3 Mile Island was a nuclear power generation facility in the U.S. that kind of went south, if you will, and caused a lot of radiation, a lot of damage.
So, do you think that that would be a good reason to make sure that we don't have nuclear items here? What exactly did we eliminate?
All of them, actually, according to the resolution, and they don't exist anymore.
So, would that eliminate them as a possible source of power as well, then?
Yes.
That's unfortunate as well, because I hear that eventually, if they could be sustained in some sort of a safe or non-destructive environment, that may be a beneficial thing. Well,
I mean, we're talking back in the mid to late part of last century, Tom. So it could very well be the technology has changed to make it a little bit safer.
Yeah.
Ask the people in Japan. Well,
you know, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. Well, let's get back to perhaps a little bit more urban discussion here. Municipalities, things like that. From the notes and the research that I've been making and doing here, it looks like the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association Distinguished Service Award was something that I read about. What is that's wordy. Why is that so wordy?
Yeah, I really have no idea. It's it says for distinguished service. It's
now, is this something you got?
Really just for service, I think.
So did somebody? I assume this is one of the ones that you've received.
Yes, I have that on my wall. Yeah.
And so this is for 20 plus years of service of some type.
That's correct. Yeah.
So is there many of those out there?
There's only one on my wall. I know that.
Well, that's I suppose. How big is your wall?
Bigger than yours.
Maybe. How old are you? I guess. No. All right. So let's continue here. Over your life, I mean, in terms of work, as well as past and current business adventures, you've had just an incredible amount of variety and just tons of accomplishments, accommodations. But that doesn't really describe you at all. You could read your entire CV and not really learn anything about you, as I did. So thank you for giving that to me, by the way. That was good. Let's talk about your past, or your present, or possible future. Out of any of those, what do you think your favorite employment position would be?
Boy, that's an interesting question. If you do take a look at that CV, what you can conclude, and what many people have, is that I'm simply just another guy who couldn't hold down a steady job. But I try to think about it a little bit, and the reason that I did so many things is that I really was extremely interested in learning, and so each one of those, shall we call them vocations or opportunities, was an ability for me to learn more about something in our province, in our country, in our city.
Makes sense. So you like learning. I guess educational institutions would be a natural progression of that. Have you ever done any educational work before?
Well, I tried when I was 6 years old for a couple of years. It didn't go over well.
Oh, fair enough. Would you ever go back to any of the previous educational institutions that you have been to?
I'd have to think long and hard about that. There's so many intriguing things to do. But yes, as a matter of fact, there were some courses at the university that I was quite interested in taking a look at. I'd like to get a current vibe, for example, on political science.
That's actually a really interesting thing to learn about. The University of Lethbridge specifically is one of the best in North America, if I'm not mistaken. Specifically in neuroscience as well. They're really, really good. But I hear they've done some incredible things in the political science department. What can you tell us about that?
Well, firstly, it's an active department. I think pretty much the genesis of SACPA, so the Southern Alberta Council on Public Affairs, and it's a community forum where people get together on a weekly basis with a guest speaker and examine topics of interest in the community, the country, the world.
It's too bad it didn't get popular. Not on, I mean, this, obviously. Look at how many people are watching right now. I have no idea, but I'm sure it's quite a few. It looks like one. I don't know. There's probably a couple. We'll see. I bet you there's a couple people listening on a radio station as well, and we're actually broadcasting on a couple of medium right now. So, but let's get back to some more questions here. Let's see what I mean, if you're thinking of learning more about political science and things like that. Oh, checking the time already. Political science. I mean, that's a broad-ranging subject that you've really done a lot in already. But if you were to get back into it in any kind of capacity that would make huge changes, it would have to be on a macro scale or some type of international level, in theory, which may involve some more travel. I know that you have traveled a lot, and I know that you do travel quite a lot. Does that mean that you enjoy your travel experiences and you would like more of them, or you don't have particularly good ones? Or how would you rate your traveling experiences compared to the workload that you have to endure because of them?
Well, Tom, when I was your age, I loved it. I just loved traveling, and I would be off all the time to various places, and at the drop of a hat, if a client wanted me to go somewhere, I love doing it and did it. But it's getting a little harder now, so it's a very serious consideration, even now as I continue on my current employment.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So back when you used to go to see employers and travel, to all kinds of different places, I'm sure you had some pretty good experiences. What do you think would be one of your best?
Oh golly, again, the opportunity to learn is always a big part of it. But I can remember once when I was working for a road construction company, and we needed to get some equipment manufactured in Milwaukee. And it was actually quite a lot of fun. I was down there, and we.
So you went to Milwaukee?
We went to Milwaukee.
And what did you do in Milwaukee?
Well, they make beer there, I understand.
You've been told afterwards,
Yeah.
or was
No, I found that out just when I was there. I hadn't heard about that before. Yeah.
It was a fortunate coincidence then.
But speaking about, we used to have a wonderful brewery here in Lethbridge, SICKS. So Fritz Sick was the founder, and
I've heard that name before.
yeah, Fritz Sick Brewery, and and it was then bought out by Molson's, and Molson's closed it down while I was just in my first term as mayor, and so I was in England shortly thereafter, and I got to make a presentation to a couple of distillery companies at the board of directors level to see if they would be able to take the plant over and continue making beer here.
And do we make beer here still?
We don't. No, pardon me, we do.
We
do make beer,
but not that beer.
Not that beer.
That's
it's
unfortunate.
Little local breweries now.
Yeah, I hear we actually do a lot of brewing here now. But that wasn't always the case, was it?
No. It used to be. It's a difficult game financially, simply because the state of Colorado in the U.S. has one brewery that can serve all of the beer needs in Canada.
That's a big brewery.
And so they have economies of scale that would make it very difficult to compete against.
I can only imagine that would make it pretty difficult. But I mean, we must have some specialty things or something like that.
Well, people's tastes are also changing. They're going more towards the craft beers and the flavorful beers as opposed to the rather light yellow beer.
Absolutely. So, have you? Did we always used to be able to brew beer in Lethbridge? Did we ever go through any time when we weren't allowed? Did we ever have any kind of alcohol shortages or restrictions of any type?
Well, I suspect there was, not in my lifetime though.
Not in your lifetime, but probably prior. In theory, there would probably be some people that monitor that type of thing. Law enforcement. Do you know anything about that?
Well, a relative of mine, and as it turns out, a relative of yours, actually was a police officer here, and I can't remember the reason behind it because we never really had prohibition in Canada, but for some reason or other, the liquor license for a local gentleman's club had been seized, and accordingly he went in and seized all their liquor, and was required by a magistrate to turn it all back.
Well, that was good of them.
Well, it turns out the magistrate was a member of the club, so
Makes things a little bit easier, I guess. But as it all turns out, we can all drink now anyway, so it was really irrelevant.
indeed.
Let's see, what else do we want to talk about here? In terms of your past accomplishments, I know that I read something about getting to a debt-free city or something. What exactly? What was I reading? What did that pertain to?
Okay, so I was awarded the key to the city for developing a plan, and what the plan was is it divided the city's debt into two types. One is tax-supported debt, so that's when you pay your tax bill on your house. Included in there is a certain amount you make for debt payments. And the other is utility-supported debt. So when we build a water treatment plant or a sewage treatment plant, we sell the product. And so that's the debt payments on those are supported by the amount we pay for the water. So then I developed a plan to completely eliminate the city's tax-supported debt. And that was supplemented by a couple of different ideas. One was just the simple thing that you do when you buy a car. You saved up before you buy stuff till you have a down payment, and then kind of use those down payments that are accruing to fund local capital purchases.
So that seems to just make sense. I mean, that's not really difficult. Is there any particular? I mean, it worked, right?
Yes, it did work, but what the problem is that you will find very few politicians, I haven't run across any recently, that don't believe we shouldn't be incurring more and more debt.
So, I mean, debt is bad, right?
Well, at some point it has to be paid off.
So debt is a temporary thing that we have to have a plan to pay back.
Well, and the theory from a governmental perspective is a certain percentage of your GDP can accrue as debt. You can have that. That's a reasonable amount of debt. Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty good theory, but it ignores the fact it does have to be settled at some point.
And somebody must be loaning out this money, and somebody must be collecting interest payments from this money.
Well, and that there goes all the payments that you were going to provide services with.
Oh, lovely. So we're losing services, but we're paying for interest for debt that we accrued so that we could get stuff now instead of waiting till tomorrow.
So the real issue here is not so much that I could come up with a plan, and not so much that I could even implement it when I was there. The real issue is that successive mayors, successive councils have stuck to it, so that it's a plan that to come to fruition, to actually have a debt-free community, required a tremendous number of people and a tremendous amount of political will by other people, and it was really a credit to them to stick with it.
So is there any particular reason you can think of that anybody wouldn't want to do this again, or do it on a larger or even on a smaller scale?
Many people get involved in politics with the idea of making a major change in their community. To do that requires major money, and it does not require forbearance. So if you have somebody that says, yeah, you elect me and I'm going to save up money for 10 years and then put a down payment on a sportsplex, you say, gee, that doesn't sound very sexy to me.
Yeah, it doesn't have the flash bang boom of a great big 30-foot, 3,000-mile wall, does it?
Yeah. But if I'm going to go out and borrow $160 million, and I'm going to build you the best soccer rink or soccer arena you've ever seen.
Yeah, everybody's down with that.
Yeah.
But what is it costing you? Nobody's really paying attention. So that's kind of a little bit of an interesting look. Now, I assume that you must have come up with that type of plan through your chartered accountant profession. You have that is your profession, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
Good. And the actual CA designation,
Yes.
was there a major difference between the designations?
Well, years ago, chartered accountant was a person who was qualified to do a test work. So that's auditing, as well as accounting and things like that. You had management accountants, which were more leaning towards assisting management to make managerial decisions, and so that was their milieu. And you had general accountants, which tried to do both.
Makes sense, makes sense. And I'm sure that whenever you specialize in one area over another, you become more adept at it. Let's say, reflecting on all of these previous jobs and experiences and learning abilities and places and things and people, would you have done anything differently if given the opportunity?
That's an interesting question. I guess it goes back to what I enjoyed the most. And as it turns out, the things that I enjoyed the most were when I took a risk. When I stepped off that cliff without an obvious safety net below me, and then it was either flying or not flying.
Makes sense, makes sense.
And that sort of gets addictive. And I'm a very careful risk taker, so when I took my risks, I was pretty careful about how I did it.
Make sure they're good risks at least.
But nonetheless, that's where really your life is interesting.
It does make sense. I mean, that is a classic characteristic of addictive personality type. It flows into literally everything. Like gambling is the exact same thing with the VLTs and the flashing payout, and it gives you, you take the risk, and then when you win, it's really, really worth it. But this would probably be more like blackjack, where you can actually stack the odds in your favor if you're smart enough.
Well, in blackjack, the odds never actually get to your favor.
No?
Unless you're counting the cards, which last I heard was illegal.
No. I hear it's frowned upon. And they will remove you from their establishment if they decide that you are doing said activity.
And they will take you to the local jail if you're in certain jurisdictions.
Ah, yes. Well, are we in one of those jurisdictions?
I don't know. I haven't gambled much here, so I wouldn't know.
Where did you gamble?
Nevada, of course, Las Vegas and Reno. I gambled in clubs in London, Monaco, Baden-Baden, West Germany.
That's a lot of gambling. One presumes you either had a lot of money elsewhere or you won.
Or neither, no. Well, firstly, a real gambler would never tell you when he loses. He always wins.
All right, so these are winning stories then.
All of them, yep.
Great. So, what would you say your favorite gambling experience was then? That would combine a travel and a gambling experience, wouldn't it?
My wife was pregnant with our first child. We drove down Highway 101 down the coast of the United States, cut back over on the way back through Lake, it'll come to me. But in any respect, ended up in Reno, Nevada, and she wanted to see this gambling thing in action. So in the course of 30 minutes, I made enough money to pay for our entire holiday. So, but that was the one time we won.
Well, it's the one time that counts, right? It's timing is everything, is what they say. So, I guess, let's see, what else do we want to talk about here? Typically, you enjoy fine wine. I see you're drinking blue liquid.
Yeah, it's clear.
Well, that's good. That's good. If you were to recommend, seeing as there's so many more people making their own small brews now, do you know anything about where to store them?
Where to store them?
Well, I mean, you can't just put a brew anywhere. It's got to have the right conditions. Possibly dark or secluded. It needs to be relatively undisturbed. Maybe a closet or some such similar thing. Do you know anything about storing liquor in closets?
Oh, I can see where you're going with this. Of course, I mentioned earlier my father was a policeman.
He was.
And it is legal now to make your own wine in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't always that case. At some point, it was illegal to make wine, and so a member of my family decided that it was a good idea to make her own wine, but she didn't want my father to find out about it.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
So I actually had, I don't know whether you call it a still or...
You know, I mean, I'm brewing some beer right now, and it's a bucket. So
Yeah, well, that's what this was. It was a big clay pot in my closet that burbled and gurgled, and
that's precise. It's a happy beer. That's some good. That's some good brew right there.
and all my clothes smelt
Fantastic.
like. And the teachers had some odd thoughts about me.
You know, they say vodka it makes an excellent cleaning solution.
Well, maybe I would have had clean clothes then.
That's what I'm thinking. Is you probably just have disinfected clothes that smell slightly like bourbon or something similar. So let's see. What do you think? What are your best memories? I mean, you've always lived here, right?
Yep.
How long is that?
37 years last count.
37 years. Sheesh. And that's, in 1980 you were, all right. So 37 years old, well versed in many things. How many kids have you got?
I have 5.
And how old are they?
Well, it's a technical impossibility for them to exceed 37. So,
Obviously.
so some have actually maxed out right now.
So do you think there's going to be a pile up at 36 and we're all going to be twins?
Yeah, it's coming soon too, I might add.
You know, I would have to imagine. I mean, I'm going on past 30, so going on. Yeah, right around there now. What do you think one of your best memories of Lethbridge would be in your 37 extensive years here?
Oh, golly. Well, first, it's a great community to grow up in, a great community to raise a family, and I spent a quarter of a century on council telling people that. People have often asked, I work in various communities now and basically fly to work instead of leaving. And it's for a reason. This is just a wonderful place to live. It's a great climate and nice out there. The people are friendly. So in terms of memories, I mean, you can go back to all sorts of things that I've done. I can come up with. I can remember the day that I graduated as a chartered accountant, and I was walking down 3rd Avenue into the wind. Now we have quite a wind here sometimes, and just recognizing as the wind was blowing right at me that this was my community, and that was one of the features of it. So that stuck with me for a while.
The 3rd Avenue, that's one of the absolute main arteries of our city. It's been here forever, if I'm not mistaken. Literally, it's been here forever. Did it change much since you remembered it in that particular story?
Intriguingly enough, and you raise a good point. The first mayor of Lethbridge was a guy called McGrath, and his profession was a land surveyor. So the downtown, which includes 3rd Avenue of Lethbridge, was probably the only community in Western Canada that was actually surveyed before it was built. Most other communities were just built, and then they brought surveyors in to try to figure out where the roads were around them. But this one was actually surveyed before. So you'll find the streets are extremely wide.
They are.
And the buildings nicely placed, even in the oldest parts of the community. It's well developed.
Now, I've actually worked in some of the downtown places, some of the buildings and whatnot, and they are old. Like, they have dirt floors, and they're old. They're from the 1900s, 1800s. Have you ever worked in any of the buildings downtown?
Yeah, actually, I articled in the Canada Trust Building, and that was where Foster's is right now. But before then, I delivered Chinese food for the Lotus Inn. Now, that's right across from the old train station.
Okay.
And,
Yeah, that's the train station that's right beside the Park Place Mall there.
That's right. Yeah.
All right.
And in the basement there, it was partially a dirt floor and partially a concrete floor. And the proprietor's mom, I forget her name, but she kept chickens down there.
I hear that's frowned upon now.
It was frowned upon then.
Oh.
We weren't allowed to tell anybody. But, we had the freshest chicken.
I bet it was
chicken
delicious.
in town. Yeah, it was
and
good.
eggs too. And it's nobody ever dropped them off. But, so you worked there when you were articling or delivering Chinese food? You said.
Yeah, so when I was articling, I delivered Chinese food in the evenings.
Oh, you did both at the same time.
And on the weekends, yeah.
Okay.
And for a while, I also worked in a bakery in the mornings.
And what did you do at the bakery?
Well, I can't remember. I only stuck it out for about 3 weeks because the bakery started at 4, went till 7. Articling went from 8 till 5, and then Chinese food went from 5 till 11. So it's kind of running out of time.
Makes for long days. Makes for long days. So it sounds like you were definitely busy when you were articling. Now, just for those who don't know, articling, what is articling?
Well, articling is a process whereby to enter a profession, you're required to take a certain number of educational courses and required to undertake a course of study and a course of employment which will give you the necessary qualifications to practice. So articling is what it's called for a chartered accountant. It's called the same for a solicitor or a barrister. Different professions have different names for it.
So, all right. So I guess that makes sense there, and that kind of shows the progression of, Chinese food delivery, working as a baker, or whatever you did there for the 3 weeks, and then moving on to working towards a profession of some type. What do you do now?
Well, I've been basically serving on boards of directors for decades. If you include council, it's been over 4 decades. But
and how old are you?
Yeah,
keep going.
37.
4 decades. Yeah, but keep going. All right, there. Bakers, no, that's not it. They're the dog decades, right? No, those are longer too. So, anyways, I totally cut you off, but it was worth it, I think. Please continue.
Okay, so I've been on boards of directors of Special Forces Pension Plan. I was vice chair. Chairman of Workers' Compensation Board for 10 years. I was on the board of directors of Callaway Real Estate Investment Trust, so that's publicly traded in Toronto. And I served on the, let's see, what's it called? The
see if we can figure this out here.
Right on the front page.
One of these here.
No, it's not there.
No, second page. It'll be the second page.
Second page.
This is the summary of achievements, and we've got...
here we are. The Alberta Capital Finance Authority, and was vice chair of the audit committee, and I've currently am involved with Alberta Health Services.
Okay, so it says right here, to date, Alberta Health Services, chair of finance committee, chair of audit, risk committee, member of community bids. It's a lot of words in committee. What do you help with there? Who do you work with? What do you do? How do you contribute to that organization? What do you do with them?
Well, firstly, the board of directors is responsible for policy matters,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's a matter and policy matters in an organization with 108,000 employees is a significant job. They have to
only if you're trying to keep them happy.
You also have to ensure that the policies that you want to adopt are acceptable and tie in with government's priorities. So there's that. My particular responsibilities lie more in the area of finance. I'm chair of the finance committee and chair of the audit and risk committee. So in those two positions, I oversee a budget of a little more than $40 million a day.
That's a lot of millions a day. What in the world could you need all of those millions a day for?
Oh, well, 106 acute care hospitals in this province. So we've got another 500 or 600 other facilities, seniors' homes, things like that.
So wait, when you say 500 or 600 other facilities, what is a facility? Like, is a facility like a house? Like, is that where somebody goes and you like have a person stay at a house and 2 or 3 people live there, or what's a facility?
No, a facility that in this nature would be far larger, sort of a thing. And I'll use the example of a seniors residence. So you might have a couple of hundred people staying in it, or things like that.
Okay, so several millions of dollars to make one of these things, and then to keep it running with the appropriate staff and whatever else. And
yeah, a couple of $1 million doesn't touch much nowadays.
Makes sense. I mean, everything does seem to be getting pretty expensive.
Yeah.
So what else do we have in Alberta then? You said 500 to 600 facilities, like the senior care facilities and whatnot, and I assume outpatient facilities and things like that. What else? What else do we do? What else do we do with the money in Alberta?
Well, okay. I mean, so lab testing is a big thing. It's a very big and important diagnostic tool.
Yeah, you know, I can think back. I've had lab testing myself this year even. Yeah, no problem. I bet you most people have.
Yeah. So I think somewhere in the order of 80 million tests a year for 4 million people.
Okay, so that's like 4 or 5, 20, something like that each. Yeah, that's 1 or 2. Yeah, a few. We do a lot of tests.
We do a lot of tests, but it's important.
It is. We have to diagnose things in the right way.
But some of the issues are that maybe it isn't necessary to do all those tests. If we had better record keeping, maybe a treating physician could simply look at your records and say, hey, this test was done a couple of days ago. I don't need to do it again.
You know,
like
I've run into that as well, where just because they're not allowed to speak to each other or something simple like that, they had to run double testing.
Well, it's not so much that they're not allowed to speak to each other. It's just everybody's very busy. Trying to get a hold of somebody at the time when you need them can be very, very problematic. And sometimes if you're showing up in emergency and you're presenting with some weird...
Faster to test again.
It's faster to test, yes.
Makes sense.
So, but the government has actually started the process of funding. See, Alberta Health Services was developed from a variety of different health regions. At one time there was 13 or 14 of them, and before that there was a separate board for every hospital. Then it was down to 7 or 8 regions, and now it's 1. But each of those regions had their own separate computer systems, own purchasing systems, own personnel systems. And now that it's all gone to 1, we can achieve a lot of benefit by putting those, because one doesn't talk to another one. And
so it makes sense to have a conglomerated system.
We have 1,300 different computer systems that really don't talk to each other very well. To put them into one is a long-term, expensive, but very worthwhile project. It's about $1.8 billion. And it'll take about 10 years because we have to be very careful. You can't ever be down.
Medical information. You can't make a typo, right?
You can't ever be down. So
makes sense. It makes sense. So I guess that's something that we'll have to just hope that we get right in the future, continuing on from this point forward, as we do tend to get better and better records as electronics and whatnot and technology.
These folks are really good. They'll get it right, but it'll take some time.
It'll take some time and some effort for sure. So we've got a pretty extended family. There's I mean, I've started looking, and there's a lot of us. And we spread out quite a bit too, if I'm not mistaken. What countries do you have direct family members living in?
Well, I mean, there's far away. There's Calgary and Edmonton and Vancouver and Champion, Medicine Hat.
You know, those are a lot of different, very, very large countries, and I am just glad that we are not picking them on a map for places to bomb or something like that. You know, I heard once. Do you know? Have you ever heard of Agrabah?
Agrabah.
Agrabah, yes. Have you heard of it? Sounds familiar? No?
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit? Well, it should. It should. There was once a poll done where people were asked whether we should bomb Agrabah. And a lot of, well, a distinct majority of Republicans actually voted yes. We should bomb out Agrabah. Agrabah, the mythical city in Aladdin from the Disney movie. Yes, so it's important to know what you're talking about, for sure. I guess that's getting back to the point of, naming them. But we have overseas family as well.
Yeah, well, my oldest daughter lives now in Singapore.
In Singapore?
Yeah.
So, now if I'm just remembering a little tidbit of information I learned, that's one of the only places in the world that makes money. Like, it doesn't have this debt thing you kept talking about before.
Probably one of the most financially successful city-states, is basically what you call it. It's just basically an island at the end of the Malaysian peninsula, and but it's one of the world's largest oil refiners.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, they've got to get their money from somewhere. So the money comes from shipping and from oil refining, and they do all their oil refining on islands offshore from the main island of Singapore. So it's in, it's out, and that's yeah.
So I know that in Alberta specifically, because of the tar sands, we, in theory, have one of the best oil refining procedures in the world. How would it compare to Singapore?
Well, I'm not sure that we have the best oil refining in the world. I'm not sure we even do much of it. A lot of what's happening here and a lot of the discussion focuses on getting the oil to the places where they do have the capacity to refine it at a reasonable cost.
Okay, and where are places like that?
Texas.
So so it makes more sense to send the oil from Alberta to Texas
Well,
to get it refined?
what you're sending is, and there's been a lot of political statements made that why don't we just refine it here?
I mean, that does seem to make sense, doesn't it? Why? I mean, who would support sending it all the way across two countries?
Well, I think what you have to do is talk to somebody who knows something about oil rather than me.
I guess that makes sense. So back to Singapore.
Okay. They also have a very, very vibrant and robust financial services sector in Singapore. And it's kind of the entry point, or one of the entry points into Asia. And there's a tremendous amount of money there.
Makes sense. So would you say that it's one of your more favorite places to travel to?
Extremely safe community. You can go out at any time of night and you will never feel threatened.
That's a great thing. That's a great feeling to have. Why is that?
Very, very strict laws against civil disobedience. I think it's $1,000 fine for spitting on the sidewalk. There's even a fruit called a durian, which actually has quite, to some people, a very offensive odor. And there's a very substantial fine. I think it's $1,000 if you carry one on the subway. So,
wow. A fine for carrying a specific fruit on the subway in Singapore,
yeah,
right? Well,
so they have very strict civil legislation.
I mean, it's the prices you pay for living in a completely, absolutely secure environment. You're going to be giving up a lot of your liberties, isn't it?
Well, and graffiti, you see no graffiti. The cost if you're caught includes a lash. So it's a.
So what is a lash?
A caning. It's basically they make your backside bare and they whip it and the cane just cuts into it. So one of those. It's in many countries considered very cruel.
So the moral of the story is there's no graffiti, is what you're.
There was one year when I was staying there, someone had broken into the train station and put graffiti on one of the train cars, subway cars. And there was literally an ongoing investigation for weeks till they found the guy.
They just wouldn't let it drop.
And it was on the front page of their local newspaper every day.
Well, there's nothing else going on. Nobody else is breaking any laws, so I mean that's crazy. Now, what about Australia?
So yeah, it's still there as I understand.
Do you know anybody there?
Well, yeah.
Do you go there often?
No, haven't been there for years.
But you have been.
Yes.
Why?
Well, it was actually your mother and I actually went there. We to visit some of her relatives. So,
Oh, fantastic. So that would be Mom's relatives then.
yeah, yeah.
And I have one of those. That wasn't hatched.
You have a relative, yes.
I have a mother and everything too. Okay, well that's excellent. I mean, and I hear she loves me. She's probably maybe watching. That could be a thing.
Or possibly listening.
Maybe listening, maybe watching.
Yeah.
We are in both capacities broadcasting, so that is ideal. Now, I guess that's a little bit of my family lineage, but technically my lineage isn't completely your lineage. Your lineage goes in a separate direction, which includes mine. What can you tell me about your lineage?
Well, okay. So my mom was a music teacher. She graduated during the Depression, and
Oh wow!
intriguingly enough, she's was a licentiate of the Royal Conservatory of Music in London, England. And to get that designation, they actually sent a fluent instructor during the Depression to Lethbridge to test her. And so that was pretty significant. Her father was a marine engineer, so his training was all in marine engineering on boats.
Mm-hmm.
He regrettably got seasick.
That is an unfortunate coincidence.
It's very difficult for him, so he ended up working mines, working as an engineer in the mines. First in South Africa, then in Canada. So
perfect. So, what else do you know about your family history? I mean, that was your mom. We talked about Grandpa. I mean, we haven't even said who he was. That was James Harold Carpenter, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
If I'm not mistaken, yeah, I'm not mistaken. That's so. And you said he was a police officer? Was he just standard, regular police officer?
Well, he started off as a standard. Right? He eventually rose to the ranks of chief of police in Lethbridge, and actually was president of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police at one time. So he's a pretty distinguished guy. Pretty straight up guy too.
That's always a good characteristic to have. If there's one thing that I can always just remember, it's always honor above everything. Honor, always honor. So I assume that must be what he instilled into everybody. Would be the thought process.
Yeah. Most of them had rubbed off.
Pretty much. Well, it's eventually. I mean, you would know either way. It's so. I mean, I guess we're closing in on just about a full hour here. We do have a couple minutes left. It looks like we might have people that have been sending messages or whatnot. I really have a difficult time seeing anyways, and Dad doesn't know about how to check this stuff while we're actually recording. But let's open this up for a second here and see what else we can finish with. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about specifically?
Oh no, I don't find myself that interesting.
You don't find yourself that interesting. Well, I'm sure there's many other people that have plenty of things that they wanted to ask you about. In fact, just what was it? 2 nights ago, I believe I was speaking with somebody who thought you were still working at a printing company.
Well, I was in that business for a while, and I really enjoyed it. It was
apparently it stuck in people's minds. They went after mayor. He was printing, but that's not exactly the order, was it?
No. It was actually printing first, and publishing. So I was Farmer Stockman Advisors, pretty big around here. So we published in Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan, and Montana. But also I was a publisher of the Tabor Times, the Sunny South News, Vauxhall Advance, and the founder of Lethbridge Living magazine.
Interesting. All right. I mean, that's... It sounds like I know personally that I could keep coming up with random questions that would keep many people entertained for hours and hours on end. But we do have to come to a close relatively shortly here. So I'm going to leave this off by asking you to tell me about your self-described most treasured achievement. So tell me about the Canadian Secretary of State for contributions to Canadian citizenship and multiculturalism.
Okay, well, the first thing is that I never wrote any of this stuff. Whenever I left a position, I asked the people after I had decided to leave to write down what they thought I accomplished. So,
smart people, smart people.
So that particular one, so multiculturalism is always was a cornerstone of Canadian culture, and for a while it sort of fell out of favor, and people started looking south of the border. The melting pot theory, where we come from all over, but we eventually just spout out the other end as Americans. And here we kind of celebrate this fact that we're different, that we have all these incredible cultures that we can learn from, and all these different ways of interacting with each other. So that's multiculturalism, and so I kind of really cottoned on to that, and my parents did as well. So I kind of came by it naturally, but it was always good to have and learn a lot about people from Poland or Hungary, or
so basically immigrants that were coming. We made a distinct effort to learn about them,
yeah,
and to make them feel welcome when they came.
Well, and to learn the best of their cultures, and to share the best of ours with them. So yeah, and it's I think multiculturalism, some say it's an experiment, I say it's working pretty well here.
Well, I mean, if I were to dig right into the core of that, it sounds like it's just, again, education and learning about your surroundings and the people that you're living with is really just what you're saying again. And that's the same answer you've been giving for every single position you've liked, as well as any other thing. So would it be fair to say that learning and education is pretty much the core of everything that you enjoy when you do things?
And that's the key to it when you say enjoy. That's because unless you learn about something, unless you give it some time and figure it out, you never really know enough about it to form an opinion. So when you form an opinion, make sure it's a good opinion.
You know, and with that, I think that we're going to cut this radio interview off, and I hope that you all learned something about either one of us here today. That is going to be us from the Info Assault. I'd like to welcome my guest and thank you, David Carpenter. My name is Thomas James Arelis Carpenter, and we are hosting live on Jess FM currently, broadcasting out to Facebook and I Hate Donald Trump and Lethbridge and all kinds of people. And thank you so much. You guys have a great evening.